Welcome.
Hey.
Paul Schrader, Willem Dafoe.
Hi.
Sit down, guys.
Hello.
Yeah, perfect.
Good.
How you guys doing?
I think good.
We're doing all right.
You think so?
Coming to the end of this.
Promotional tour?
Yeah, we began in Con off and on, so I think this is sort of the end of it. There's a retrospective in New York for me this week, and that'll be it. And on to the next.
So you will, Paul. We're on live right now, by the way.
Oh.
But you're still in that mentality of on to the next. I mean, you've been movie making for, and in the process of movie making for so long. You're still motivated to just keep making the next one and the next one and the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's the alternative? Just the sheer curiosity of trying something new. Brett Easton and Alice and I did a film a couple of years ago, which we did self-funded.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the challenge of that was, could we do it? Could we pull this off? Well, we did pull it off. Part two of the challenge is, could we do it with Lindsay Lohan? And we did pull it off. I'd never do it again.
Can we kill it?
And the challenge of this one is a different challenge, and on to the next. I was just talking to Willem about what he's doing in Italy next year, which is something unlike he's ever done.
What are you doing in Italy next year?
Well, I'm doing a theater piece. That's I would. It's every time I do a theater piece, it's always different. Every time I do a movie, it's always different. That's one of the pleasures of being an actor.
Right.
I've never been to Italy.
Oh, you gotta go.
I just wanted to throw a boring fact about myself.
It's interesting.
Thank you.
Heard of it though?
Yeah.
Heard of it. Right?
They just closed it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I missed my shot?
Yeah.
Paul, I have to ask you as a director and as a guy who's a writer too. If you were
You're not a writer.
No,
Or
Paul,
a guy. Okay.
Paul is a writer.
All right.
If you were making a film, right, and some kid who's got one line in the, say a comedian has one line in the film. He's one.
Yeah.
And right before you start filming, he approaches you, and he's rewritten the entire script to create himself as a co-star. And he goes, "Hey, Paul, I just had a couple ideas. Why don't you let me know what you think of this? I rewrote it."
It's happened.
It has happened.
Have you had anybody do that?
Oh, yeah.
How do you handle that?
Well, usually with brutal honesty, and occasionally profanity.
Good.
But the other thing happens too, which is you have, a day player with one or two lines, and you pull them aside earlier in the day and say, "Hey, there's not much here. You two guys, you're playing cops. You want to work out something together and show it to me. I'd be, maybe we can make it more interesting."
Yeah.
See?
Because Colin Quinn, I don't know if you guys know Colin Quinn.
I don't know if you guys remember Crocodile Dundee 2. But I was in Crocodile Dundee 2. I had a line. So I took the script, I read it, found it a little wanting. So I rewrote, I cut out Charles Dutton. I made myself the co-star with Paul Hogan. It's like 1987, whatever. And then I handed it in. I had one line. I handed it in to the director and the producer and waited for their response. I literally sat there and made it more of a New York type thing with me and Paul Hogan running around because the plot was New York.
He's realized what a horse's ass he is.
And they just kind of, they were Australians. They were like, don't worry about it. And I was like, they're
No
lost.
worries, mate.
And then when I saw the movie, I was like, look at these guys. They blew it. They could have done my version.
Do you think that was rude of them not to get back to him, though, to at least give an opinion on how it was?
I think it was very gracious of them to even accept it.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, I would have definitely fired me in retrospect at the time.
What would you have done? If you found out that you were on a movie set with somebody of the audacity of a young Colin Quinn to do something like that, do you just not want to deal with him?
Yeah, I won't deal with it.
Well, especially if you were the guy.
Let him do what he wants.
It's creepy, yeah.
Especially if you were the guy he tried to
Let
write
him
out of the
punch
script.
himself out.
But and my poor girlfriend typing it away. I'm like, so giving her the lines. I didn't even type it myself.
I'm into rope-a-dope.
You are.
Yeah.
Just let him make the mistakes. Keep going, and then eventually he'll just be out of your life. That makes sense. So the new movie is called Dog Eat Dog. It's out November 11th, and it's a it's a very trippy movie. How much of that, I guess, Paul, was in your head? Because there's a lot of visuals going on in the movie. So when do you see the script and go like, okay, this is where I want to go with this thing?
Well, it's had an odd sort of beginning. I'm not a crime film director. I didn't really set out to make a crime film. I wanted to make another film with Nick Cage because of something that had happened. And so this turned out to be it. And then the challenge was, how do you make a crime film in 2016?
Yeah.
It's such a tired genre. The ex-cons, the final job, blah, blah, blah. And so now you're just trying to be imaginative and trying anything. And fortunately for me, the best role was this character, Mad Dog. But Nick said that he had just played a Mad Dog and he wanted to play the straight role. So then I could go to Willem and offer him the crazy role, which was the best role. And we could reprise Wild at Heart from 25 years before.
You directed one of my favorite movies, Blue Collar. And what was the set like?
Well, I mean, a lot of stories have been told.
Yeah.
I mean, from the first week on, it was either some form of verbal or physical confrontation.
Who was the main? It was Harvey Keitel, Yaphet Kotto, Richard Pryor.
Yeah.
They played Detroit Auto Workers. It was like 1978. Who was the major?
Well, it
problem?
had to be Richard, of course, because he really was one of the unhappiest people I've ever met.
Really?
And he had what I called at that time the big and black problem, which is he wanted to be the biggest entertainer in the world and the blackest entertainer in the world. Well, you and I know it doesn't work that way. So that whenever he got really big, meaning popular, he would think less of himself and get mean and get very black. Once he got mean and very black, he would get disappointed that nobody liked him, and then he would swing the other way.
Right.
So woof, woof, woof. It's exhausting, It was exhausting to watch. I can only imagine what it was like to live.
How did Yaphet Kotto and Harvey Keitel deal with that? Did they take well to it?
Well, no. I mean, it's partially my fault. I had invited 3 bulls into a china shop,
Right.
and told each one they were the alpha bull, and then stood back.
Was he the worst you've dealt with?
Who?
Was he the hardest you've dealt with?
Richard, simply because of the race. Race always makes it's a 10X. It throws up everything. I mean, you can deal with bad behavior, you can irresponsible behavior, drunken behavior, but race behavior is another thing. When an actor says to you, like Richie said to me, he said, the first white man I ever met came to my mama's door to fuck her, and you're just like him.
Did he mean that as a compliment?
So, at that point you say, hi, that's interesting, Richard. I never heard it put that way.
Yeah, that's kind of in a scenario where you're not going to win.
Yeah, I wonder if that was to put people off base or something, or catch you off guard or something. There's no other reason to say that.
Well, I mean, or if you just live in that jungle of these things that are pulling you one way or another.
So it's just dumping, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd read stories about that, and it was such a good movie.
Did you
did that?
Did you really write Taxi Driver in 3 days?
No, I wrote in 10.
See, Colin
Okay.
told me 3
See,
days.
we
Colin
said-
Quinn has been saying the whole
He said
morning.
3 days.
3
You would
days.
write it in 3 days.
No.
We know what you do with one line.
Colin is half right. I wrote 2 drafts in 10 days. And then I went right from the end of the first draft to the beginning again. So I think the first draft, which was only 50 pages long, was in 3 days. And then in the next 7 days, I wrote a longer version of the same script, which got to be regular length. So that 3-day version was essentially a tone poem, an outline.
Right. He just did the outline, Colin, in 3 days, not the whole script.
See, great screenwriters know what really happened. Croc Dundee 2, I wrote that. Yeah, it was about 4 days.
Yeah, okay.
Well, as a director, when somebody says to me, I would like you to read my script, I've been working on it for 2-3 years, you go, oh my God, no, please. On the other hand, someone says, oh, I just dashed this thing out, it's no good, I wrote it in 4 days, and you say, please, let me see it. Because anything that's going to come out in 4 days has a reason to exist.
Right.
And Travis in there, he's embarrassed to ask. Here's what he wanted to ask. When De Niro said, "Are you talking to me?" and he kept repeating it, did you write that in or did he just do that?
I can't believe that was his question.
That dialogue is barely ever written in a script. That's just sort of improvisatory thing where you describe a situation. Travis looks at the mirror, has his guns, pulls out his guns, talks to himself, pretends to be a bad guy, and then because. If you write that stuff, it'll never be as fresh as when the actor kind of makes it up.
That was my guess, but he said no. He probably wrote out every word.
Yeah, that's what Travis said, but he's usually wrong.
He usually certainly is wrong.
He's generally wrong.
Fool.
So,
Why is he in the other room?
Because he's wrong so
'cause
much.
he just
Yeah, we keep
throw
him
out
in
wrong
there.
information. So I guarantee you he wrote it out.
Get punished.
Yeah, he's a fountain of misinformation,
Yeah.
so we have to keep some distance from him.
I figured as much.
Yeah. You're going to be a part of the new Justice League movie. Is this true?
Yeah.
How do you feel doing the blockbusters? Because obviously you were such a huge part of Spider-Man, and that was a monster of a movie.
Right.
As compared to stuff like Dog Eat Dog,
Right.
which is more small scale and I would say experimental with a lot of the stuff that's done.
Yep.
When you get into something that's a blockbuster and you've got a lot of cooks in the kitchen,
Right.
is that tougher for you? Is it more boring? Is it...
It's different. The pace is different.
Yeah.
And, when it works well, you get time to refine things. If something doesn't work, you can reshoot it. You have more resources. But, of course, with more cooks and with more resources, sometimes you can overthink it. I mean, this is kind of a parallel to what Paul was talking about, screenwriting. Sometimes with films that have less resources and have a very strong director and a good team behind them, you just get to it, and there isn't too much second guessing. So both can work, but I like to mix it up. I like to be flexible. Every time I start a movie, I got to reinvent what it is that I do and rethink it.
And that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find that's the way that, where I find pleasure, and it keeps what I do alive rather than, a canned thing and, I'm not in the lockstep.
Well, it's hard to get things through, too. Like, I have a really good cop movie. I do.
I didn't know
Nobody
that.
will yeah.
You do?
Colin.
Yeah.
It's actually a great crowd to talk about it in front of.
That's
good.
It's a black cop and a white cop, and they get thrown together as partners, and they don't get along. And the chief is always on them.
Is that the whole?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the whole.
Really
Wow.
good.
Is that
Did you
something?
just think of that?
Yeah.
Willem, is that something you'd be interested in? Would that be interesting?
If I can play the black guy.
Yeah, but they're both transsexuals.
Yeah, oh, yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, this is sounding good now.
It gets really hot at the end, yeah.
How quickly do you know when you're making a movie, Willem? Like when you get to set, how quickly do you know when you're like, this one's going to be a disaster? I'm not going to like.
You
What
never
films
know.
has he ever done that's a disaster? I can't think of any.
I can't
That's
name
a
one.
weird question, Sam.
Yeah,
You
Thank
guys
you.
don't know my filmography. No, listen.
There've been a few. You're saying.
It goes without saying. You
Yeah.
don't know. You don't know. I mean, for you, you can have instincts about whether things are functioning and whether people are engaged and whether people are shooting themselves in the foot or not. But I've even been on films that didn't seem to be functioning, and then they do. People really respond to them, and vice versa. Films that feel really compelling to me, and I'm engaged, and interesting things are happening, and then it comes out, and people just don't bite. So you never know.
What was
What do
your
you-
favorite moment in Platoon?
I don't do favorite moments.
Oh, come on.
I mean, come on. It's all one moment leads to the next. What can I say?
It's a wonderful movie.
Thank God for not answering
No,
that
no, no.
question.
Don't make
Thank
don't,
God.
I have
Don't
a-
answer the
don't make
question.
things small, guys.
I have a favorite moment.
It's big.
I have a favorite
The
moment.
long. Yeah.
Don't respond. Whatever he says his favorite moment is. Please, I want silence in this room. Let
It's a
him think
lovely-
let him think about this.
No, it's a lovely fucking war, gentlemen.
I don't think that was in Platoon. but-
Oh, that's right. It was Apocalypse Now. Yeah, it was.
How? So you don't know if you're making a piece of shit, but when
Why
you go
does
to
he
the.
make
mo-
Yeah, why do you have to say it
it's
that
not
way?
Willem's
My question
fault.
was
He
bad,
said
but you
some
can tell
people
me-
don't. He says some people don't respond to the material. You go
But
a
you
piece
know.
of shit.
Yes.
You know when you're.
Thank you.
You know when you're
That's
watching
an important distinction to
And,
make.
and often an actor can't see that much of the big picture because maybe he's worked 2-3 weeks and other people have worked 10 weeks.
And he's concentrating on his part of this project. But when you see it in a theater or something, and you're like, oh, God damn it, this is not great.
This is really fucking. I can't even sit for this.
I can't.
You know
It's very
what?
uncomfortable.
This is films 101.
You know what? It's really hard
It's
for
too
me to.
amateurish.
It's really hard for me to see because when you see a film, the associations of making the film are so
Gotcha.
strong, and you're watching it, and you may say, "Oh man, that felt so good." Is that what it is? Ugh. Or the opposite can happen too, where I thought, "Oh man, I remember we really struggled with that. That didn't work." But here, it comes together. So
And people respond, yeah.
yeah, I mean, this is why it's a good game. You know, you can't control it. You can only, apply yourself and hope for the best. So
Yeah.
Paul, how'd you get involved with Raging Bull?
That was De Niro's project. Neither Scorsese or I were terribly interested in doing a boxing movie. You know, look at us, two short, asthmatic, religious kids. But De Niro had this obsession with it, and I was on the set. I was finishing shooting a movie with George Scott called Hardcore, and De Niro came on the set. And so I knew he wanted something because he never shows up unless he wants something. And and he had developed the script and he could not get a green light. And so he asked me if I would rewrite it. And I found out something very interesting when I started researching it. Jake LaMotta hated his brother Joey so much that he wrote an entire autobiography and never mentioned his brother. Now, the book was based on Jake's autobiography, so there is no Joey LaMotta in the book, nor in the script. And I start researching, and I'm saying, here they are, the fighting LaMottas, Jake and Joey. I said, wow. And I said, this is a sibling story. You know, they make this deal. You know, one of them gets beat up, the other one gets the pussy, and they split the pot. That's a formula for drama.
So wait, did they? I had heard it was his friend Pete that did it, but I didn't realize he hated Joey, and that's why he wasn't in the book.
Well, Pete did the adaptation, but the book itself, which Pete Savage was involved in writing, there is no Joey LaMotta in it.
Wow. So they did actually make up.
No,
Never.
never.
Oh, that was just for the movie.
Those were actors.
Yeah, it wasn't a documentary.
I wasn't sure. I was wondering how you got that footage in the garage. No, 'cause we interviewed Jake. He was a little bit of a dicey interview. He was in his 90s, but I asked him, I think, about the brother. Like, I think someone said, did he actually fuck Vicky? And he was like, nah.
Yeah, I mean they didn't make up in my time frame. I don't know if they made up before Joey died.
Willem, internet lore about you is that you got kicked out of high school for making a porno. Is that true?
Not exactly.
Well, tell
Wait, you weren't in high school, but she was?
No.
we need to get this story on the record, you know, because
No, I made a little magazine show and I interviewed some people, and when we were shooting it, there was some kind of racy stuff, some nudity. It wasn't a porn film.
but there was nudity. And are you
Yeah.
doing it like with the high school's equipment and all
Yes,
that? So they were
yes.
pissed.
They were pissed.
yeah.
And someone went into my editing room. I'm 16 years old, 17 years old, and they went into the editing room. I wasn't going to present this stuff, but I wanted to be free in shooting. So we had a good time, and someone saw the rough footage, and that's a lesson for you.
They
Don't
ratted
let
you
them
out?
into your editing
But
room.
also, this must have been the time of the Living Theater when it was all around.
Yeah, it's about that time. But I'm also very far from the Living Theater because I'm a high school kid, very unsophisticated in Appleton, Wisconsin, just trying to make his way,
How do you, at 16, how do you convince girls to take their tops off in movies?
Oh, what, you kidding me?
What he's really
Do
asking
you
is...
remember Ugly George?
No, I don't know.
Oh.
No.
Do you?
Sure.
Who's Ugly,
Ugly George is a guy when there was public access TV. He was a guy that went over in a silver lame spacesuit with home video equipment, and he'd pick up women downtown that were on their lunch break and get them to an office somewhere and get them to take off their clothes.
Right.
And it was interesting because people did it. And
Just because of the camera.
Just because of the camera. And it was new. At that time, video stuff was new. Right. And I think there was also a turn on about just the strangeness of it all.
So what inspired you to do? Like, how did you know? Because like when I was 16, 15, I'd be
listen.
too
There
afraid
it is.
to.
Ugly George. They just put it up.
Yeah,
The ugly George.
Look.
Yeah.
he doesn't
Boy,
look
these
so
people are
ugly.
on the ball.
But it was kind of amazing, that show.
Right.
I was amazed how
big
he
camera.
could seduce people into taking off their clothes.
And you're like, I
It's-
could do that.
It's as much about how people secretly like to perform and like to, have something out of the usual happen to them.
Now, are you sure he didn't meet them before and work this out? Because I see a lot of porno where it's like they're meeting girls on the street. But it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
they're
Well,
That's before all that.
before all the releases were. All right.
Yeah, you just see a lot of
Yeah,
porno,
I think-
period.
But anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. So you were
so that's
inspired.
my response to how easy is it to tell someone to take off their clothes.
Ask Ugly George. Yeah, it's not that tough. But what were you inspired by him, or like, wait, I could do?
No.
he
This
wasn't
is
wrong.
way
Oh,
before.
Sam.
I tell you,
Sam,
I'm,
you're
a
out
kid,
of line.
I'm a kid. I'm a kid that sees 60 Minutes when it's just first starting, and I'm playing with video equipment, and I'm going to do 3 interviews of these people. But
Right, but take your top off too.
yeah,
That's great. That's great. And then you went into experimental theater. That was like the first thing you were doing. Like that's what I read.
that's what I still do.
Experimental theater. Explain experimental theater to me.
It's a word that I would never use, but it's just not mainstream commercial theater. It's the theater that I was involved with for many years was the Wooster Group.
Right.
For 27 years. We were a small company that made their own pieces. They were theater pieces. They weren't traditional in the respect that the structures weren't traditional. They weren't traditional psychology, traditional narratives. Used a lot of visual things. I don't know. It's hard to say exactly what it was, but I can, for your audience and for us right now,
Right.
I can just say it wasn't your usual Broadway play.
I see.
It's more like off Broadway. Like I'm Italian, you're Jewish, and we're both in therapy.
Yeah. In other words, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not in that order.
I see. And that's just what you liked. It's what you still like doing
Yeah, it's
because it's different, like you were saying before.
no, it's just it gets to what's beautiful about theater. I mean, I think the traditional theater is weighed down by certain traditions of literature and psychology that doesn't tap into what's great about theater, the event of theater, and doesn't use all the beautiful things about live performance. And I think there was a period, and there still is a period, where some people are working with those other elements that tap into what's special about theater.
I tried theater. They said it didn't work. It just wasn't working.
Why didn't it work?
I would do a funny line and I would look at the audience and I'd wink and then look back.
Works for me.
Yeah, they were very displeased.
You wanted to get the credit from the audience.
Yes, I did.
That's cute. I read an article that you wrote. I think it was from a few years back, but it was an article. I think something to the effect of what you know about women or something like that.
Oh, no, I didn't write an article like that.
yes.
You didn't.
I probably did some little piece, it probably was a set piece in a magazine that they, is basically a Q&A or something.
And then they
that's how
turned it-
they turn it into that because that's the form. But it's basically just like this. I'm hawking the latest movie to try to get attention to it so people go and see it.
Right.
But
they
no,
turn your
I
interview
don't
into
need
like
to, I don't need to write an article about what I know about women. That's
Do you like to do the
embarrassing.
press for a film or do you hate it? Some guys hate being
it's
interviewed.
listen. I don't mind talking about what I do. I probably like it too much, but after I do it, and sometimes it's engaging, and sometimes you learn things, and it's fun, but sometimes you feel really raped because you're at cross purposes. Because they have an agenda and you have an agenda, and it's not doesn't serve the same purpose.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we've now entered the era where it never ends. I mean,
promotion,
30 years ago, you could do 10.
Where'd Colin go?
He went to the bathroom. I think he's ran for the bathroom.
You could do 20 spots and sort of cover the media. Now you can do 20,000 and only have your foot in the door.
And
you have
also,
go ahead.
because of that, there's so much emphasis put on press. There's so much emphasis put on content and finding breaking things that you can talk, and that will never get covered until you fuck up and you say
Right.
something really stupid, and that's what they run with. So you wonder why people promoting things get tight and they try to control things and can't speak freely, it's because they don't cover the body or of what it is. They cover just really the juicy stuff because we're in a
Click away.
soundbite world.
You
Yeah.
feel like they're trying to, like it becomes a gotcha thing where they're trying to get something out of you that's scandalous, so it gets
so
picked
that
up.
makes you tight,
Yeah.
What kind of guy was George C. Scott, Paul? Can I ask you that? Off the
Complex.
subject. It was.
At the time I worked with him, he was very angry, but I suspect that was probably true in general. He had just directed 2 films which he had financed himself, and both flopped. And so he was in a kind of sour mood, and that had turned him back on the sauce. So I did not meet him at his best.
Okay.
But he was extremely professional. I mean, he said to me right at the beginning, he said, I'll give you a second take, and if you need a third take, you can ask for it. But that's it, because take 17 and take 1 will be identical. And they were.
They were. I like that you're. I heard Robert Shaw was like that on Jaws. Like they said, someday he would come in, he would be like really raring to go, and other days he'd had a few, and it was a little tougher to get the shot. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Shaw was more of an out of control. I mean, George was not out of control. In his contract with Columbia, his agent stipulated 5 days of no shows, presumably due to alcoholism.
Oh wow.
And it was exactly 5 days. He counted them off. He said, "I get 5 days." Boom, 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 boom.
But it wouldn't be more.
It wouldn't be 6.
Wow. Wow. Well, listen, everybody should check out the movie. The movie's called Dog Eat Dog. It's in theaters November 11th.
November 4th.
Well, see, here's the problem.
We have in limited theaters.
Look at
Oh, we have 2 different dates
Yeah.
on the prep sheets.
early November 4th, limited, November 11th, wider.
Well, November 4, 2 cities. November 11, 10 cities.
There it is.
Plus the platforms.
So that's the on-demand?
That's the Amazon.
Yes,
The
yes.
whole goddamn world.
Yeah. And this is... It's a wild movie. I mean, it starts with heroin and murder, and then it just goes from there.
Oh, rom-com. Good.
So I think you guys will all very much enjoy it. And it's great to see at this stage in both of your careers that you're still doing stuff that's fun and new and relevant and different and inspired.
Thank you. Do you mean me and Colin?
No, I wasn't talking about you or Colin, as a matter of fact. But thank you very much, Willem Dafoe and Paul Schrader.
All right.